Man, Mike, we need to get some new intro music to Law and Legitimacy because I start listening to that, I start zoning out. Next thing you know, I feel like I'm going to doze, and then I look up and all the time has passed. Welcome back to Law and Legitimacy, everyone. It's Friday, and based on what I'm reading, it's sweltering across the United States. So I thought I'd give you a little relief. My background photo today, you'll see, is a bookstore. Actually, it's in an old barn, a sheep barn in southern New England. It's called Whitlock Farm Booksellers. My wife and I own it. It's located at 20 Sperry Road in Bethany. You can find it online, WIHTLOCK, Whitlock Farm Booksellers. Give us a scan, buy something. What the heck? It'd be great to have a month where we didn't actually lose money at it. But every community needs a local bookstore. Whitlock's has been serving southern Connecticut since the late 1940s. The family's been selling books in the greater New Haven area since the 1890s. The story behind Whitlock Booksellers is wonderful. But there's a little bit of snow. There's me leaving the shop. That was probably 15, 20 years ago. Set yourself free, it says over the door to each of the book buildings at the bookstore. There are several barns filled with books. And that's what reading does. It sets you free. So we're going to open up the lines today. Yesterday we got together, Mike and I. What are we going to talk about tomorrow? I'm like, man, I've been working outside all day. I don't have anything on my mind. So we took the coward's way out and decided we'd do the Ask Me Anything sort of thing, the AMA day. Then of course the news started trickling in. There's an interesting piece of news at University of Michigan this morning. The University of Michigan has decided to ban the use of ChatGPT in admissions applications. In other words, newsflash, you have to draft your own essay about why you want to be a lawyer. Now, the notion that a person...
I think we found your mic. Your hand is on it.
Sorry about that. Well, okay, I knew I had one in here somewhere. So you can't use ChatGPT to draft your law school application. And so the university says if you do, and we find out, we could revoke your admissions, we can expel you. I mean, it's yet another slap at ChatGPT in the legal world. You'll recall the controversy in the Southern District of New York not long ago, where lawyers used ChatGPT to draft a brief for them. The problem is the brief sounded pretty good, but the cases didn't exist and the citations didn't exist and the lawyers got sanctioned. But who's going to decide that a computer can speak better for them than they themselves, especially for a law school application? I was on the admissions committee, not for law school, but in the graduate school at Columbia many years ago when I taught there. And the thing that was amazing to me was how much the same all the candidates for admission looked. Everybody was smart. They had near perfect grades as an undergraduate, and they blew the lid off of the standardized test. And so I just looked at the whole lot of them and I thought, man, these people bore the hell out of me. And the thing that made it, the decisive factor in admissions was the essay. And I'd read the essay and I'd say, which one of these persons would I actually like to spend some time with? And the ones that wrote interesting essays were the ones that I gave the nod to, all other things being equal. By the time the applicants were screened for minimal qualifications, everybody could have done the work. The question was, who did you want to talk to? And the essay said that. ChatGPT doesn't. I know, Mike, you seem to think that Michigan's adopted a toothless policy.
Absolutely, yeah.
What would you do if you were the dean?
Well, if I were the dean and this were a policy that we had internally discussed and decided that it was to preserve the academic integrity of the pursuit of the law school, and we were going to advertise that you could face expulsion if you are found to have used ChatGPT and somehow were admitted, or it would be an automatic denial of the application if we found that, during the admissions review process that ChatGPT was used in any way, shape, or form within the application. I certainly wouldn't admit that we can't enforce it. Right. The first thing I would do is make sure to not say to people that we have no way of enforcing it, so we're going to rely on their honor. But that's just me, Norm. That's just me.
No, I mean, but let's talk about that because, so much depends on an inchoate sense of honor and on a sense of integrity. And, in every university, like the prohibition against plagiarism is rooted in an honor code. And if you are summoned to explain an essay, you're presumed to be truthful, and being untruthful would be a violation of the honor code and grounds, even in of itself, for discipline, if not expulsion. So I don't, and the law is largely self-policing. People, when you are, so in order to become a lawyer, folks.
Norm, I think that there is a difference in setting the standard and saying affirmatively, this is precluded, this behavior is precluded. It's something entirely different to set that standard and then to admit that you've got no stick to the carrot.
No, I got it. No, I hear you.
Like, will I be able to enforce it? No. That's insane.
But I mean, consider what you're doing with when a person wants to become a lawyer, typically in the United States, you go to law school, you go to an ABA, an American Bar Association accredited law school. Presumably, you pass. Then you sit for a bar exam, and the bar exam is a test of basic legal principles over common fact patterns. And the bar exam's purpose is to establish that you are minimally competent to answer general questions about people who walk in your door for purposes of protecting the public. It doesn't say you're a specialist, doesn't even say you know much of anything. You just know the minimum requirements of a variety of fields of law. But then you also have to pass a character and fitness review. And the reason for that is lawyers are supposed to be trustworthy. We manage trust accounts on behalf of others. We manage their secrets. We advance their interests in highly contextual and conflicted ways. And so, is it? I see you smiling with derision, Mike. And maybe I'm
sorry, I'm distracted because Lawyer Will's in the chat today. What up, Will? But his comment says, learned yesterday that Chat GPT comes across in French as Chat GPT, meaning cat I have farted.
I'm thinking there should be a woke Chat GPT. In fact, I may write Chat GPT today saying I'm a middle-aged white man. Well, I'm not actually. I'm a geriatric white man seeking to make recompense for a lifetime of cultural appropriation. What should I do? And let's see, maybe we should have some fun with Chat GPT and start assigning it, woke things. Or maybe there should be a woke GPT.
It could just write the script for our show every morning. I think that would be fun, right, everybody?
Doesn't it? I thought it did.
I guess if you consider me an NPC, perhaps.
Yeah. What's an NPC?
A non-playable character. Come on, Norm, we've covered this before.
We have, but I'm old and feeble.
When I first saw this headline, I was like, I think I said the punchline here is that Michigan closes its doors, right? Because all these young people don't even really have a free speech bone in their body. We've so conditioned our society to just kind of go with whatever the top-down acceptable Overton window discourse is. So when I saw the use of Chat GPT prohibited on Michigan law school applications, I was like, well, damn, they don't have anything to say anyway. So if they can't have an engine make it up, I guess how are you going to fill these law school classes? But, I digress.
You do. Good news at Stanford, the diversity dean is out. You'll recall not long ago a federal appellate judge appeared at Stanford, and he was basically shouted down by individuals who appeared to protest his right to speak. And then the dean for diversity came in and basically sided with the students and embarrassed Stanford. I am in favor of freedom of speech. I don't mind her saying whatever it is she feels she has the right to say in that forum. But when she's representing the university and they're educating a new cadre of law students, and you've got a federal judge coming in to speak, minimal conditions of decency suggest you let him speak rather than shout him down. Now, how is that related to the Michigan piece? I don't know. It's law school news. I mean, one could say let the marketplace of ideas control, and Stanford's dean, had a right to speak and reflect the university's position on DEI if she wanted to. But I think Stanford made the right call. They're educating lawyers, and in the same way that we want lawyers to be honorable people, we want them to have respect for neutral principles, and one of them is the right to freedom of speech. So congratulations to Stanford. Those of you who hire lawyers, be careful. Take a look at your inbox if Tirien Steinbach You know,
Tirien Steinbach. And remember, she was the one.
if she applies, she sends a resume. Don't hire her. You know.
Well, and it was the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals Judge Kyle Duncan that was there to speak. And so the incident, we covered this on the stream. I believe we played some of the video or the audio, or at least I read some of what she was saying during the thing. I remember being just blown away by how ridiculous of a scene that was when you have an administrator from a university like Stanford Law talking to students, but then also putting the onus on the invitee to perhaps not say what they were brought there to say, asking, is the juice here worth the squeeze? So good riddance to this airhead. I'm sure she will pop up somewhere else, but this needs to continue. The purge of these sorts of airheads needs to continue. No one in the law school, even those that this airhead would politically agree with, they are not served by such airheadedness.
And this is one of the reasons Mike and I are making a special appeal to law students and to people heading to law school. We want to build a network where you can bring stories like this to our attention, and we can help broadcast and help publicize some of the silliness that goes on in the law schools across the country. What I would refer to as microaggressions against common sense. Common sense matters, intellectual integrity matters. Some of the law schools are veering off the deep end, and we intend to help you stay on the right side of reason. Hey, so New York, Mike, you got to help me. You got to walk me into reality here. New York City just settled with Black Lives Matter protesters. They're going to pay $13 million to people who claim that they were abused by police officers in the summer of love in 2020 when they were arrested at protests. You will recall the summer of 2020. If you're like most of us, you were following the advice of public health professionals, if not sheltering in place, avoiding social contact, social distancing, wearing masks, and otherwise trying to contribute your all to the public health of the nation, except if you decided to go out and protest, because in the balance of harms, there's a virus that kills people, and then there's systemic racism. And if you are out there to protest against systemic racism, that's a greater public health threat, and the rules didn't apply. So if you gathered en masse on a street and began to chant "no justice, no peace," and a police car got rocked, a store window broken, a Molotov cocktail thrown, a store looted, a building burned, hey, so much for social justice. Police officers responding to this were attempting to restore order, because many of us watching this on our television screen thought, what's going on? Our world is being set on fire and we're supposed to sit home and watch? Well, I guess that's the message from New York City, because 1,300 of these protesters are going to get a check for about $10,000 apiece from the city of New York because their civil rights were violated in the course of these protests, or so their lawyers say. But here's my question, and this is what grinds me. Just this week here in Connecticut, Meriden, a town not far from our office, another January 6th protester was arrested. This is 2.5 or so years after the event. The Justice Department is still rounding up people, and the claim was that he acted up at the Capitol that day, and therefore he needs to be brought to justice. Help me understand why, if you're acting up in New York City and stuff gets burned, police cars get trashed, stores get looted, you're out there in violation of public health requirements that we distance and whatnot, you get a $10,000 check. Whereas if you appear at the Capitol on January 6th, you get to protest, and that protest turns far less violent than the violence in many of the cities across the country. You get arrested, locked up, and potentially thrown in jail for 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 18 years if you're Stewart Rhodes. Now, I understand that at the Capitol on January 6th, they were certifying the Electoral College results, and at stake was the potential interference with the peaceful transfer of power. And therefore, in the eyes of those who justify this draconian prosecution, democracy was at stake. But let's not be over dramatic. This was about a 6-hour interruption in the counting of the votes, And that the counting of the votes was expected to take several days. That was the testimony among Capitol Police officers at the Proud Boys trial. They knew it was going to be a contested event. They expected a lot of arguments on the House and Senate floor, and they expected the counting to last days, not hours. It was never expected to be completed on January 6th, and it was. Now, I'm not saying that the individuals who protested at the Capitol aren't guilty of trespass, a misdemeanor. I'm not saying that they didn't disturb the peace, another misdemeanor. I'm not saying that several of them may have engaged in violent contact with respect to police officers. And all of these would warrant criminal charges, but selective criminal charges. The notion that we need to throw the book at each and every one of these people and incarcerate them for as long as we can under the most serious charges we can imagine doesn't make sense to me. And when you hold it in juxtaposition, that is, alongside the treatment of the BLM movement protesters in New York City, that in the summer of 2020, the results are discordant, jarring, and quite frankly, in my mind, suggest a criminal justice system that is tilted in one direction and is profoundly delegitimizing.
Well, here, let me help answer the question. You asked how or why. Here's why. Look at the date on this.
January 14th, 2021.
Attorney General of New York, Letitia James, who we have covered on this stream before for various issues, including the lawsuits between her and President Trump against one another. In January of 2021, a mere, 8 days following January 6th, launches a lawsuit against the New York Police Department for the use of excessive force. And so what we have here with this settlement of $13 million to 1,300 plaintiffs can be seen really as a fix. The quote from Letitia James was, "There is no question that the NYPD engaged in a pattern of excessive, brutal, and unlawful force against peaceful protesters. Over the past few months, the NYPD has repeatedly and blatantly violated the rights of inflicting significant physical and psychological harm, great distrust in law enforcement. With today's lawsuit, this long-standing pattern of brutal and illegal force ends. No one is above the law, not even individuals charged with enforcing it." So here's the answer to your question. It's because the DOJ, the federal DOJ, hadn't already launched a lawsuit against Capitol Police or any of the DC area law enforcement branches, claiming that they had been using excessive force in their curtailment of any of the riots or anything like that leading up to January 6th, right? So this lawsuit was launched after the 2020 riots, all that kind of stuff. But and what she's seeking is there to be a third party monitor of the use of force across the entire New York Police Department. That's what she's trying to get out of this lawsuit.
And that's not an uncommon thing for civil authorities to seek. The Justice Department, the federal Justice Department, has monitors in place at cities across the country where they believe that police need better training in the use of force because they use it unreasonably. And folks, if you constitutional hawks say, well, what is reasonable force? Doesn't the Fourth Amendment prohibit unreasonable searches and seizures? It does, and the use of force is regarded as a seizure. And so police are trained to use force, and they have a right to use force, even deadly force, to overcome resistance to their show of authority. Deadly force being used if they or someone faces a near and imminent risk of death or serious physical injury. Short of that, police officers are trained in application of force in a number of ways. They wear a uniform and are taught to behave in a way that suggests a command presence. They issue verbal commands. People are expected to follow them. If they don't, and if they resist, an officer may place his hands upon a person in a way you or I might not be able to. If the person continues to resist, they maybe use handholds, or they may use takedown moves that they're trained at in police academies to bring a person under control. They also carry with them a number of tools that they're trained to use: nightsticks, pepper spray, what are those, tasers, and of course firearms. There are elaborate rules that govern when each of these applications of force can be used and under what circumstance. There's no bright line cookbook test for this. The courts basically say not every push, pull, or shove when seen from the vantage point of the calm of a courtroom, is unreasonable. Jurors and judges are instructed to look at situations as police encounter them on the street. And so it's understood that a lot of what the police do with use of force will be shocking to civilians when they see it, because most of us don't walk around with pepper spray trying to control an angry crowd that's in the midst of rioting. Police officers do use it. And so, one of the problems with the isolated photography, and here we have a person moping for the camera who's apparently been pepper sprayed. What we don't see is what he was doing in the moments before the spray. Now, is it possible that officers gratuitously sprayed people who were doing nothing more than peacefully gathering to protest? Yes. Is it possible that officers used pepper spray rather than other physical force to subdue people who weren't following their instructions to stay off private property and to move along? That's possible as well. These should be determined on a case-by-case basis. New York City's decision to allocate $13 million to be spread around over, however many, 1,300 protesters suggests throwing money at a problem, and candidly sends exactly the wrong message to groups that are planning protests. And that is, go act up, misbehave at the margins, and maybe you'll get arrested and paid for your trouble too. I mean, imagine being that BLM protester today who decides, hey, wow, I'm getting a $10,000 check for that shove I got the other day. That's pretty cool.
Well, imagine being a protester that wasn't even from New York and you were there, and now you're getting a payout from the city because you just, rode in.
Yeah.
Anyway, two things here. Number one, lawyer Will makes a great point. He says, quote, "The lawyer who threw a Molotov cocktail into a police car in Brooklyn during the BLM riots only got sentenced to 15 months. Correct. Right. Correct. I wanted to read that because this is the juxtaposition. We started with law schools, right? Stanford Law, Michigan Law, and then we're talking about the application of our justice system and the use of force with law enforcement officers. You have the top law enforcement official, second to the governor, I guess, in the state, and Letitia James, the attorney general, suing the police department that happens to just now be paying out $13 million to over 1,300 people protesting at a riot in the middle of COVID. Which here's my favorite part. What I've got here on the screen, Norm, says plaintiffs marching against racially targeted police brutality were allegedly, quote, physically restrained and put in, quote, dangerously close quarters, all in the height of the global COVID-19 pandemic. Lawyers said, arguing the same tactics were not used during similarly sized protests of different issues, according to the complaint. It's just so funny that that one could say, I'm out here subjecting myself to high density populations, exchange of bodily fluids, whatever it might be during the middle of this. And then your lawyer on the back end says, oh, they put us in close quarters even during the middle of COVID. It's just
just another I don't know why anybody would choose to live in the city of New York. I mean, if you could flee. That's my view. I mean, I can't imagine being a city resident and deciding this is how my tax dollars were being spent. But, the good news is people have the ability to choose to live where they like, and you get the law enforcement. We get the law enforcement we deserve and the government we deserve. And if this is what the people of New York want, they can have it.
Let's talk a little sports, shall we, before we get to AMA? And
what's up?
Yeah, as I put into the chat as well, we'll be starting AMA here in just a few minutes. So please start filtering in your questions for Norm and for me, if you care to. And we'll take a few minutes on this Friday morning to relax, kick back, and just kick it with you guys. So what I've got here, I think you're the one that found this, Norm. And it is an interesting turn of events based on what we've been seeing. The battle that we've been seeing in the collegiate sports arena has, to this point, been between the NCAA and individual states, as these individual states attempt to legislate and regulate the use of name, image, and likeness for college athletes to monetize their personal brand while also existing within that college athletic sphere. So there's an inherent tension between the way the NCAA expects things to be handled and the way that that individual states are attempting to legislate, and individual states are also trying to battle this at the high school level as well. So they have a little bit more of an expanded scope. But what we have here is 3 senators, none other than our boy Booker. From what state is he from? He's from New Jersey.
Cory Booker, is it Maryland or New Jersey?
It's okay, so there it is, New Jersey. So 3. So we've got Senator Richard Blumenthal from your good state of Connecticut, got Jerry Moran from Kansas, a Republican, and then Cory Booker. And I didn't know this until reading this article, but apparently Cory Booker played college football. I'll have to look into that. I don't want to say anything more about that. However, I
thought he went to Yale. Maybe it was, because I hear stories about him turning up at Shabtai events, Orthodox Jewish student events. But anyhow, yeah.
Well, look, BTL's in here. Hey, BTL, you have an excused tardy. Please sit down, though. We have this, I guess, draft. We have this draft bill up for discussion, and it's pretty broad. So what I have here on the screen is obviously this bill produced by these 3 members of Congress aims to create a new commission, which they want to use to establish an entity that will be known as the College Athletics Corporation. It's not going to be a for-profit entity, but it will have subpoena power to compel records and all sorts of other stuff for investigative authority to regulate and enforce, I guess, the policies that it eventually adopts if some version of this comes to be passed as law.
So is this like the Federal Trade Commission or the Corporation for Public Broadcasting?
And I would love to have Vivek Ramaswamy just weigh in on this because of his complete hostility to the administrative state in its current form and function. And I tend to agree that when I read this article and just to skip to some of the things, they want to establish some sort of medical trust fund or a medical trust so that athletes can pool for healthcare related needs, whether they're in college or whether it's sometime after their collegiate career. They want to establish some sort of compensation scheme to ensure, an equitable pay scale. They also want to establish an independent medical review board and staff it with physicians and trainers and therapists such that college athletes and the teams they're on no longer have the autonomy or discretion to make decisions in game, whether an injured player or a player that comes out for a play or two can go back onto the field or court or whatever it is. This independent review board will do what they do in the NFL now with the concussion protocol. And they'll just say that if, in their independent determination that it's too much of a risk for you to go back in, that you're not allowed to go back in. So there's my overarching takeaway from the initial read of this stuff, and let me see if I can find.
Sounds like they're trying to nationalize college sports. I mean, again,
that's absolutely what I took for it. Is that number one, you have an aggressive and vibrant and just this crowd of college athletic fans, former college athletes who are gung ho.
Oh, here we are. This act may be cited as the College Athletes Bill of Rights. Hey, folks, whatever happened to the Bill of Rights that applied to everyone that basically said to government, get your frickin' nose out of my back pocket and let me breathe without federal oversight?
Oh, that's awesome. We have sports are something that people get excited about. It's a product that people watch, they attend, their fandom runs.
It's one of the only things I can turn the television on to see now. If I'm going to have to watch a bunch of pureed national standards in federal sports, well, we take this
moment. BTL, wow, with the $10 tip. I'm showing you mercy for sure. Thank you. BTL, happy Friday to you. I think, Norm, my issue here is that college athletes have been very descriptive and very clear about the need for compensation. What they are getting with this is something entirely different. And it doesn't appear to me that this is going to have any tangible benefit to the product on the field or the collegiate careers of those involved.
They're getting a federal nanny. They're
absolutely going to regulate the competition out of sports by and through this bill and the creation of this College Athletics Corporation.
Having said that, have you been following the hazing story out of Northwestern?
I've seen stuff. I was hoping to get around to reading about it, Norm, but I have not.
All right, let's bracket it for next week because, I mean, I do understand that these are young kids in a high stress and in high compensation environment for the colleges and for their coaching staffs and whatnot. And I do think that it's important to provide them with protection. But the notion that the federal government has to come in and create yet another bureaucratic entity that's going to generate its own standards and become a litigation mill, and ultimately result, I don't want to say in the dumbing down of college athletics, but in the bureaucratization of college athletics, such that we end up watching yet another mass-produced whatever. Ugh. I mean, whoever, this is an example of the deep state's tentacles reaching into where you relax on a Saturday afternoon and saying, we'll tell you what you can enjoy and we'll tell you how you can enjoy it. But I mean, who's going to take those standards from Dick Blumenthal? Look at the guy. He's about 6'2" and he weighs about 150 pounds. He's Jack Sprat. He can eat no fat. And this guy is the ultimate nanny. And he's got ideas about how you should spend your leisure time, how you should work, how you should play, how you should express yourself. He is the public health state personified. Sit down, Dick. Give it a rest. I don't want to see this in college.
Well, and they continue. I think so. I mentioned at the beginning of this, the NCAA obviously has its issues that it's trying to iron out, and I believe that the NCAA is also seeking some sort of antitrust protection as well, but that's not provided for in this bill. Nor is well, and we'll get into some of the details I think later because they do even mention. I think you'll see here that they even mention the Northwestern issue. In this article, which is why I said, I wish I had a little more time to prep for that. But Moran was saying that what is transpiring, or at least what I read in the press is transpiring at Northwestern, is not something that was contemplated as we drafted this legislation. So I'm interested to kind of get back to what's happening there to understand what he would be concerned with.
Does this legislation stand a chance of passing, Mike?
I don't think so. I really do think that this is an attempt to score political points. It's being branded as bipartisan because there's a Republican involved with Cory Booker on this and with Blumenthal on this. But ultimately, I don't think anyone in the college athletic sphere. I think that because this would also require that universities publish their records on how athletes are being compensated, to what degree they're being compensated, and to ensure that there is an equitable compensation structure across these demographics and diverse criteria, right? So this is why I said the overall feeling of this is it's just being completely neutered, right? College athletics it would be completely neutered with any manifestation of something like this.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Bring this Rose Bowl event is brought to you by the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee of the College Bill of Rights National Fund for making sure that nobody's feelings get hurt.
Is the juice worth the squeeze?
And it's Friday. I'm glad the week is done. I guess you folks were quiet, didn't have any questions. That's all right. We wouldn't have had any answers. We had fun today, though, and we had fun this week.
Yeah, let's give it a couple seconds here. Let's see if somebody will throw in a question or two just to lob it up. I think we've been going about 45 minutes so far. Norm, can you want to talk about a little bit about the bookstore? I'm always interested to hear about your passion for owning that. And I think that I'm beginning, as I get older, I do have a bit of an appetite to do the same thing here, just a little bit further south. So can you talk a little bit about that? We had
punch up something for Whitlock Farm Booksellers. So when I was a kid growing up, which I actually did, you might be surprised to learn, we were impecunious, which is a polite way of saying we were broke. And so in school, they'd pass out scholastic book order forms, and you could order books, and the school would your parents would give you dough, and the books would come at school, and they were great educational devices. Well, I would always look at those catalogs, and there were about 100 things I wanted to read, but there wasn't any money in the house, so we could never get anything. But I learned to love libraries and spent a lot of time in libraries as a kid, reading about places I'd never go and things I'd never get a chance to do. I loved books on the far west and cattle drives for some reason. And so I've always been very comfortable in bookstores. And so, jeepers creepers, had to be about 2003. I live in the country in Connecticut outside of New Haven. A local bookshop called Whitlock's Book Barn or Whitlock's Farm Booksellers was on the market. It was located on several acres adjacent to a water company plot. And the owners, Gilbert Whitlock, the last living owner, had recently deceased. His nephew was running the place, and they were looking for a buyer. I went home one day and said to my wife, "Gee, what do you think we make? Why don't we make a? What would you think about making a run at owning Whitlocks?" And I expected her to say, "Are you kidding? You own a law practice. I'm busy. We've got a lot of property here and animals to tend. There's no time. That's ridiculous." And then I would have said, "Okay, I tried." But being my loving wife, she said, "Oh, yeah, sure." So one thing led to another, and we purchased Whitlock Farm Booksellers. The store itself, and for me, it fulfilled a lifelong ambition to be involved in helping others to read, but it also and spreading my love of reading, but it also served my own idiosyncratic desire to have as many books around me as possible. I'm something of a hoarder. We probably have about 15, 20,000 books spread around the house and office here.
And some maps as well, right? That's another.
And maps. So
Yeah.
books. So the Whitlock. Here's the story of the Whitlock. That's how I got involved. Whitlock Farm Booksellers. In the 1890s, the Whitlocks opened a bookstore in downtown New Haven, and it served the Yale community. They bought a place out in Bethany, a small town north of New Haven, about 9 miles north, and across. And it had a sheep farm and goat farm and chicken farm across the road. The boys of the owner of the initial bookstore got interested in estate sales, that is, buying books from people who recently died. And what you do when you go to an estate sale is you see they got 3,000 books there, 10 I really like, and that may be valuable, but you buy all 3,000 to get the 10. And then what do you do with the 2,900, 990? Well, they stuck them in one of the barns. And when the barns got full in the 30s and 40s, Dad said, "Hey, we got to do something." So they stuck a can in the corner, and people would come in and pay on the honor system. In the late 40s, they put an old cash register in there and staffed the place. And there is the cash register. And it's been fully staffed and operating since. We are grandfathered in under the municipality's zoning code. And we sell old maps. We have 19th century maps that range down from southern Maryland, northern Maine, into western Pennsylvania and beyond. These are usually from a company called the F.W. Beers Company, B-E-R-S. The irony there is before automobiles, when the incentive was to create maps for local travelers, there wasn't a great market or incentive to build to sell maps on a retail basis, but people wanted them nonetheless. And streets didn't all have numbers and names, and so if you wanted your house included on the map, you paid a small subscription fee, and it would say the Boyer Place, and it would locate it on a particular road.
I love that story. Yeah, I love that story.
We've got maps. We've got books of collectible value that you can spend some serious money on. That is the upper barn. In that we have the so-called beach reads. Those are beach reads there on those shelves. Books you can get from $1 to $3 or $4. We find most of our books at estate sales and over-the-counter sales. We don't purchase everything that we're offered because people just bring us more than we can sell. But we try to pick things that we think are interesting, and obviously we try to make some money at it too. And so in the collectible world, we have dealers who visit the shop regularly from up and down the East Coast, and from time to time they'll find real treasures in there. One of my favorite near misses was I went out to Rhode Island once to look at a collection of Rhode Island history, and I was thinking about buying it and bringing it back to the shop. And I thought, well, we're central Connecticut. I think I'll leave Rhode Island to be. Come to find out, there were historical pamphlets buried in the book worth tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds. And I left those on the table. My other favorite story is when one of my first book calls, when I went to look at an estate sale, I noticed within it a collection of a copy of Commodore Perry's report to Congress on opening up Japan to commerce in the West. I think it was in the mid 19th century. The multi-volume collection had lithographic drawings in it, and those drawings included nude geisha girls. Well, In Victorian times, those pages were regarded as pornographic and they were disbound or ripped from the volumes. So what I had was a rare collectible copy of Commodore Perry's report to Congress. And lo and behold, we were able to sell that volume to a New York dealer, and it covered the entire cost of purchasing that library from the family of 3,000 or 4,000.
Wow.
So there's magic in old books. There's
Norm, I want to acknowledge this. We've got another $10 tip from In the Cloud. Thank you, In the Cloud.
Thank you.
In the Cloud says two things. Number one, I'm gonna do this in reverse order. In the Cloud, she says she checked it out a while back to see if they shipped.
And we do.
And says, I'd be game for a mystery subscription mail, Norm's choice. So that's just kind of a cool idea, right? Maybe take that and make something with that. That's a really cool idea. Thank you, In the Cloud. She also says, one thing you wish you'd done differently thus far in your career or practice.
Why don't you start, Mike?
One thing I wish I'd done differently. I think I wish that I had been less afraid, I think is the right word, of taking on or being involved in some form of litigation. I am finding that, and maybe it's all in due course, but thus far in my career or practice, I think that maybe that aspect of it, being willing to challenge administrative agencies earlier on, but I'm not sure what benefit that would have been other than to sacrifice some of the rapport that I do have with certain of those within the regulatory agencies that I work with. So I think there's cost benefit. I think just from a practitioner's perspective, being able to iron out and also develop a reputation for knowing or for being willing to iron out uneven applications of law, or iron out vagaries in law as applied. So that, I think that would be mine. It's not super interesting, but I think that's what, I love about being on the stream with Norm every day, is that my appetite continues to grow for that.
Yeah, I think for me, I wish I'd listened more and talked less. I'm so cantankerous, and it really stems from a sort of lifelong sense of insecurity. And so I feel like I'm always fighting with everybody about everything. And if I just shut up, sit down, and listen, my life wouldn't be as difficult as it is. I've led a sort of unwieldy sort of life and gravitated among a number of different careers, and even now have my finger in a number of different pies and never really fully arrive at a sense of peace or a sense of belonging. And so I'm a lone wolf, and I think that makes my life harder than it needs to be. I think that professionally, I didn't have a goal as a kid other than survival. And I found myself in college and doing really well. And the next thing you know, I was at Columbia and I was teaching there. And I sometimes wish I had stuck with college teaching. The 4 great benefits of college teaching: June, July, August, and the Christmas break, and plenty of time to read. And reading and learning remains my passion. There's no drug like the learning curve. So I think I wish that I had knew to listen more and fight less. Having said that, I've made a pretty good living as a professional fighter, and it's what I do. So that's my answer.
Yeah, I think when I try not to indulge those sort of what ifs too much. It's a great question, because I think that I can only really speak for myself, but it's one that I'm constantly looking at, and not that I'm preoccupied with nitpicking right, wrong, good, bad for myself on a, like refreshing a web page or something like that. But everything is in cycles. I was talking to my mother a couple of days ago, and she was asking how things were going. And I was able to tell her with confidence that I was now able to recognize the peaks and valleys, and it just the normal cycle of business and practicing. And when being able to recognize when you're on a sort of a decelerating into what I would consider a trough, right? Stress increases, things seem a little more bleak, prospects narrow. So you really have to become rigid as a sort of a solo, or somebody like me in a practice with my best friend, but one law partner. and out here without, outside of the confines of big law or, medium-sized practice, doing something that a lot of other lawyers don't know a whole lot about, all the while trying to, trailblaze and grow the practice. So I think for me, it really is taking more risks, even though I look back and I think that I was taking as much of a risk at every point as I possibly could, just being out on my own, and trying to create something for myself. But I think it is that, just finding new challenges sooner and being willing to just start doing sooner than being preoccupied with, whether to do it or not. I think that is the cleaner version of what I was trying to say.
Gold Store, Connecticut, take that grandson of yours over to Whitlock's, 20 Sperry Road in Bethany, and give him $10 to spend. And then when you get to the cashier, tell them you know the owner. Maybe they'll give you a discount. But you'll find that you can really fill a bag with dreams and fill a child's head with wonder. And there's no greater gift than a book to a child, in my opinion. The sign above both buildings at the bookstore was the first thing I did after acquiring title. Put the sign above each doorway. Set yourself free. That's what happens when you walk into a bookstore. Go there and get it done.
Lawyer Will asked Norm, and I think maybe this is the last question we'll take. There aren't a ton in here. I think he asked two, but I'll give you. I think the second question is maybe self-evident, but the first is, Norm, which of your cases are you most proud of?
I don't know what that means, to be proud of a case. I work hard in each, and so my view is that a lawyer's job is to identify his client's interest, counsel the client on whether how close you can get the client to achieving those interests in the dispute at hand, and then in the course of litigating and trying the case using legal doctrines that you can identify in a creative way to advance your client's goals. And so, I've had scores of not guilty verdicts where including one just last week where a client was accused of first-degree sexual assault, and we walked out the door a free man. Having said that, I stood next to Alex Jones, one of the most hated men in Connecticut, if not North America, and defended him through thick and thin in a default judgment, and that was catastrophic for him, and now have taken his appeal. I'm proud of both of those results, and I like to think that no one is the sum of their worst moments, and that when they come to a lawyer, they ask the lawyer for the lawyer's best advice, the compassion, and fight. And I try to give it in each fight. In terms of cases that'll go on my tombstone, one that I'll always remember is the Kevin King case. This was back in the 1990s, I think. He had raped and murdered someone, a girlfriend of his, and was facing the death penalty. He didn't get the death penalty. I didn't have him on those cases. But he tried to escape from the prison before he went to the Supermax, injuring a guard in the process. And then the guards beat him up. I sued the guards on his behalf at the request of the Connecticut Public Defender's Office, and let him come into the courtroom in his prison fatigues and let him tell the jury what he was accused of and why he thought that he had one last chance to breathe free and why he tried to escape. And, the jury looked with wide eyes. And in the end, they agreed with him that the guards had behaved no better than the people they were guarding. And they awarded him damages in the amount of $2.1 million,
wow,
which was a result that shocked legal observers around the country. So I guess, I'm proud of that. It's a case I'd take again. I don't know if I could win it again, but it is what it is.
Wow. Well, I don't know how I would answer that. I know how I'd answer that question on your behalf, but I don't know that story is fully told yet. Far from it. So I'll reserve my thoughts. I'll consider myself a case for you. So I'll answer for you and say the case of taking Michael Boyer under your wing and doing a live stream every day is the case you're most proud of.
I mean, I just get out of bed in the morning and try to do, and whatever gets done. And what doesn't get done, it wasn't for any lack of trying. We're only here for the flash of an eye. And so my view is make as much noise as you can, because when you're dead forever.
That's true. That is absolutely true. More and more true every day. Well, Norm, let's close this up. I just want to take an opportunity to thank our live chat for today, in particular BTL and in
thank you, BTL.
the $10 tips. Never expect those.
Thank you very much, folks.
Very much. And I also want to just remind people that we are here Monday through Friday. Our goal here is to continue to grow our following, modestly or otherwise, but we are, hopefully you're starting to see some more consistency in the posting, and maybe the quality is getting better as Norm and I develop a chemistry with each other on screen. So we appreciate
it. And as if we rely on ChatGPT to give us insight into the events that affect you and your lives.
I'm not giving a secret away. Anyway, we're
Watch
here.
This, folks. I'm going to disappear.
Be prepared in just a few minutes for Norm's waiting to post. I was waiting to publish your thing, thinking that we could do it over the weekend to maybe give people something to wake up to Saturday or Sunday. But I'm going to go ahead and publish the piece that you put together about Donald Trump. So be prepared for that, everyone. Please read that, share that, respond in locals. That's where we are. And obviously, we're here every day, 8 a.m. If you can't find us on Rumble, YouTube, Twitter, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Audible, Overcast, etc. And Norm, I'm looking forward to next week. We'll get cracking again.
Let's get it done. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Have a great weekend, Norm.
You too.